Welcome to the Mysteries in the Dark podcast. I am your host, Luna Sparks, and I am joined today by my co-host, Omar Trekker. Today, we are going to explore Kim Peek's legacy. You may not have ever heard of Kim Peek. I know. I have only recently learned of the incredible Kim Peek story. Hey, Omar, have you ever heard a story that just shatters everything you thought you knew about the human brain? I mean, it completely flips it on its head?
Oh, absolutely, Luna. I think the brain is probably the last great frontier, right? It's so complex. What's on your mind today sounds like you've stumbled upon something pretty mind-blowing.
I really have. I was reading about Kim Peek. You might know him as the inspiration for the movie Rain Man, but honestly, that barely scratches the surface. This man, his story, it's just beyond comprehension. Imagine someone who could memorize 12,000 books. Literally everything he read, almost 98% of it, just etched into his mind forever. But he couldn't button his own shirt. He couldn't tie his shoes. He couldn't even operate a light switch.
Whoa. Wait, so a walking, talking, living library, essentially, but with such fundamental challenges with basic motor skills? That's an incredible dichotomy. How does that even work? What was going on there?
That's exactly it. He was born in 1951, and from the start, doctors knew he was profoundly different. His head was abnormally large, he had a damaged cerebellum, but the biggest thing was his corpus callosum. That's the bridge of 200 million nerve fibers connecting the two hemispheres of the brain. It was entirely absent. His brain had no bridge. The left and right sides couldn't communicate in a normal way.
No corpus callosum. Neurologically, that's almost unthinkable. How does a brain even function without that massive communication highway? I mean, typically that's what integrates everything, allows us to have a unified experience, right?
Exactly. At 9 months old, doctors told his parents to institutionalize him. They said he would never walk, never speak, never learn anything meaningful. They basically said he'd be a burden, a tragedy. But his parents, Fran and Jean Peek, they refused. And what followed? It just quietly dismantled everything we thought we understood about the human brain and intelligence.
That's an incredible act of faith and love from his parents. To go against that kind of medical advice, especially back then, I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. But then, to see what he became, it's almost like a miracle, isn't it?
It really is. He didn't walk until he was 4, and his motor skills were a lifelong struggle, like I mentioned. But here's the kicker. At 16 months old, before most kids are even speaking in full sentences, Kim started memorizing entire books. By age 3, he could read, and he remembered everything. I mean, everything. By 6 years old, he had memorized the entire Bible. Not passages, not favorite verses, the entire Bible.
The entire Bible by 6. That's beyond prodigy. That's a whole different level of cognitive function. And he didn't just have one island of ability, did he? Savants usually excel in one very narrow area.
No, he didn't. That's another part of the mystery. While most savants show brilliance in one area, like music or math, Kim mastered at least 15 different subjects: history, geography, literature, classical music, sports statistics, mathematics, calendar calculations, postal codes, area codes, television station locations, highways and roads across America. The list just goes on and on.
15 subjects. So it wasn't just raw memory. It was the ability to integrate and recall information across a vast spectrum of knowledge domains. That almost contradicts the idea of the missing corpus callosum, which would suggest a lack of integration between different brain functions. How could he possibly be making connections across all those different knowledge sets without that bridge?
That's the million-dollar question that science still can't fully answer. He could read 2 pages at once, one with his left eye, one with his right, and finish a thick book in under an hour, and he'd remember about 98% of it permanently. Over his lifetime, he memorized roughly 12,000 books. Can you even imagine that? 12,000 books?
12,000 books. That's not just a person, that's a whole university library walking around. I mean, he must have been able to just instantly access any fact. You could ask him anything and he'd just pull it right out. Was it like that?
Exactly. You could ask him to recite Shakespeare, any play, any scene, and he'd do it on demand. Ask him how to drive from San Diego to Portland, and he'd map the route instantly, naming every highway, every town, every single turn. Give him your birthday, and he'd tell you the day of the week you were born, what songs topped the charts, what movies were released, major world events that happened that day. He was, quite literally, a living, breathing encyclopedia.
That's incredible. So what did the scientists say? I know the article mentioned NASA studied him. What did they find when they looked at a brain like that, essentially rewired in such a unique way?
They studied his brain in 2004 using advanced imaging technology, hoping to understand how such processing was even possible without that neural bridge. They built 3D models, analyzed the unusual neural pathways Kim had developed to compensate, compared his brain structure to everything they knew about neurology. And you know what they found?
No clear answers? I'm guessing that's the punchline, right? Because if they had, we'd probably be seeing headlines everywhere about a breakthrough in understanding the brain.
Exactly. No clear answer. Kim Peek remained a mystery, even to modern neuroscience with its most advanced tools. His brain had rewired itself in ways that shouldn't have been possible, creating connections science couldn't map or explain. It just defied all conventional understanding.
That's fascinating and frankly a bit unsettling in the best possible way. It suggests that our current models of brain function might be far too simplistic, or at least that there are compensatory mechanisms or entirely different operating systems that we don't even have the framework to understand yet. It makes you wonder what else our brains are capable of, what pathways might exist beyond the standard ones.
It really does, but here's the part that I think is the most important, the part that truly challenges everything we think we know about intelligence. All that knowledge, all that extraordinary capacity, didn't translate into what we usually call function. Kim relied on his father, Fran, for nearly everything: dressing, bathing, navigating daily life, understanding social cues, abstract concepts.
Right, the buttoning a shirt thing. So he could recall entire historical timelines but couldn't manage a simple, everyday task that most toddlers master. That's a profound contradiction. It really forces us to redefine what we mean by intelligence and capability, doesn't it?
Absolutely. He couldn't operate a light switch, the motion confused him, he struggled with metaphors or sarcasm, he couldn't work a job or live independently, his mind could hold 12,000 books, recall any fact, map the entire American highway system, but he couldn't button a shirt. Was that a deficit, or simply a different configuration of what it means to be human? Our definitions of intelligence suddenly seem so incredibly small when confronted with someone like Kim Peek.
It makes you realize how much our society values certain types of intelligence and function over others. We often equate intelligence with practical skills, social adaptability, problem solving in a conventional sense. Kim Peek just blows that entire framework apart. It's almost like his brain was running a different operating system, optimized for information storage and retrieval, but not for real-world interaction.
That's a great way to put it. And his story gained more recognition, of course, because of Rain Man. In 1984, screenwriter Barry Morrow met Kim at a convention, and he was so moved by this gentle, extraordinary man that he spent 4 years writing a screenplay inspired by him. Dustin Hoffman even spent time with Kim before filming, studying his movements, his speech patterns, his way of engaging with the world.
And the film was a massive success, winning multiple Academy Awards. So that must have thrust Kim into the public eye in a way he hadn't experienced before. Did that change his life at all, beyond just being the inspiration?
Oh, it changed everything. When Dustin Hoffman won his Oscar, he publicly acknowledged Kim's influence, saying, "I may be the star of the movie, but you are the heavens that inspired it." And after Rain Man, something truly unexpected happened. Kim, who had lived most of his life in relative obscurity, suddenly had a purpose beyond just memorization.
What do you mean by purpose beyond memorization?
He and his father traveled nearly 3 million miles over 2 decades, speaking to almost 60 million people, many of them students with disabilities or learning differences. Yes, Kim would demonstrate his abilities. He'd answer questions, perform calendar calculations, recite passages from books people named. But more importantly, he taught something else entirely.
So he became an advocate or an example for a different way of seeing things?
Exactly. He taught that intelligence has many shapes, not just one, that disability and extraordinary capacity can coexist in the same person, the same brain, the same life, that different is not the opposite of valuable. that our categories, smart, disabled, functional, broken, are too crude to capture the full spectrum of human reality. It was a message of profound acceptance and reevaluation.
That's such a powerful message, especially for people who might feel marginalized or misunderstood because they don't fit into conventional molds. He showed that there's value and unique potential, even in what society often labels as a deficit. Dr. Darold Treffert, the savant syndrome expert, he studied Kim, right? What was his take on it?
Yes, Dr. Treffert studied Kim for years. He said, about once a century comes along a truly stellar savant, and Kim is one of them. His memory is not only deep, it is remarkably wide. He made this distinction that most savants have islands of ability and seas of disability. But Kim had continents. That really paints a picture, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Continents of ability. That's a perfect metaphor for the sheer breadth and depth of his knowledge. It makes you wonder if our current diagnostic tools and categories are truly equipped to understand and appreciate such unique neural architectures. Perhaps disability itself is a term that needs to be re-examined when we encounter minds like Kim Peek's.
I think so too. Kim Peek died of a heart attack in 2009 at just 58 years old. His father, Fran, who had cared for him every single day of his life, who even joked that raising Kim took 30 hours a day, 10 days a week, he died 5 years later. Barry Morrow, the screenwriter, he donated his personal Oscar statuette to Salt Lake City in Kim's honor. It sits in a library now, which is just so fitting for a man who was himself a library.
A beautiful tribute. But I imagine his true legacy goes far beyond awards or fame, doesn't it? It's about the questions he posed, the paradigms he shifted.
Absolutely. His real legacy is the reminder that the human mind holds mysteries we haven't mapped, that our definitions of intelligence are smaller than reality, that the categories we use to understand ourselves, smart, disabled, functional, impaired, are limited constructions. They're useful sometimes, sure, but incomplete always.
That's a profound thought, Luna. It really makes you pause and reflect on how much we might be missing, how many forms of genius we might be overlooking or even mislabeling, simply because they don't conform to our preconceived notions. We're so quick to categorize and define, but Kim Peek shows us how limiting that can be.
Right? He could memorize 12,000 books but couldn't button a shirt. He could calculate what day of the week December 25th, 1642 fell on, but couldn't understand why people shook hands when greeting. He could recite entire operas, but struggled to understand why his father laughed at jokes. Which of those abilities matters more? Which defines intelligence? Which measures a life's value? The questions themselves just reveal how little we understand.
It highlights the fact that human experience and capability aren't linear. They're a complex tapestry, and sometimes the threads that seem broken are actually woven into something incredibly unique and beautiful, something that offers a different perspective on reality. It's not about being less than or more than, but simply different from.
Exactly. Somewhere in Salt Lake City, there was once a library where a man read 2 pages at a time with different eyes, absorbing the world's knowledge while struggling to tie his shoes. And inside that contradiction lives a truth we're only just beginning to approach. We don't yet know what the human mind can truly do.
We don't yet know what intelligence truly means, and perhaps, most importantly, we don't yet know which forms of genius we've been calling disability. Kim Peek was born with a brain that shouldn't have worked, missing that critical structure, damaged in ways that should have prevented learning. Doctors said institutionalize him.
And he memorized 12,000 books. Science still can't explain how, and maybe, just maybe, that's the point. Maybe Kim Peek existed to remind us that reality is larger than our theories, that human potential exceeds our categories, that the mind is wilder and stranger than anything we've built to measure it.
He was proof that our understanding is incomplete, a living, breathing window into something we can barely glimpse. And that's why, 15 years after his death, Kim Peek remains unforgettable, not just because of what he knew, but because of what he proved we don't know.
He truly was a remarkable human being, and his story continues to challenge and inspire. Thank you for joining me today, Omar, to explore such an incredible life.
Thank you, Luna. It's been a privilege to reflect on Kim Peek's legacy. It's a powerful reminder to keep an open mind about the incredible capabilities of the human spirit. Until next time, this is Omar Trekker signing off of this episode of Mysteries in the Dark. Catch you on our next episode. Have a great day.